in the Democratic Party, you are not elected. You are selected. That's how this works. So anybody who gets this half-baked idea in their mind that when something like this happens, that all of a sudden you are now magically going to enter the race and have a chance to win. No, they make these plans years and years in advance.
This is what happens. The cautionary tale of Sheila Sherfilis McCormick, when you interfere in their selection and bequeathment process. See, these representatives that die in these seats, they truly feel entitled to pick their successor, have a say-so about who takes their place. This is real. And so when somebody dares to challenge that chain of command, then the Dems will go after you, even if you're a good Democrat. But if you're getting in the way, if you don't know your place and that you know when to wait your turn, yeah.
Well, this was one of the things that you experienced in the first go around with Wasserman Schultz. They're like, oh no, that's Debbie's seat. You're not allowed to do that.
Right. Yeah. And she's alive. But when you do it after they die, it's the same thing.
Yeah. It's like, no, this was not for you. This is for somebody else.
We've already decided this.
Yeah.
Yes.
I want people to understand that when they think you're getting anywhere by fighting through the Democratic Party, you're a goddamn fool. Like at this point, you're just banging your head against a fucking wall. Okay?
They're running a hospice. They're running a hospice.
Everybody who's got this idea in their head that AOC is coming to save the day in a few years, yeah, good luck with that. Let me assure you, good luck with that. You know why AOC might become president? I'll tell you why. And he was seeking, and David Scott was seeking another term at 80 years old.
That's the whole point. This guy is running. And how long has he been sitting there?
I'll tell
13th term. So what, 27 years? 26 years?
Almost a generation.
And
but
died while running.
But he's black and he's in Atlanta. So you can't say anything. You're not allowed to say anything. That's considered a non-starter.
And Atlanta is one of the worst places as far as the black misleadership class is what they call it there. And it is very, very predetermined who goes where when.
Well, that's the South in general. You know, everybody has this idea in their mind that the solid South, which was always a Democratic Party stronghold, is now magically a stronghold of the GOP. One of the primary reasons why the Democratic Party or the GOP is so strong in the South is because the Democratic Party cares more about protecting their fiefdom than they are about representing working people. Again, when JFK died, the party pretty much died with him. It didn't happen overnight, but it happened.
Okay, and so this guy is connected to the rest of the party shenanigans. How? I'm curious to see the segue into the next, because I didn't realize we were combining this. So I'm curious to see.
The problem that you have here is that the Democratic Party has decided that they are going to play the same game that the GOP is playing, which is we're just going to gerrymander all the districts and we're not going to have competitive races. Like there's no point. Yet the way the Democrats frame it is that they're saving democracy because they prevented the GOP from doing it. So we did it first. That's their argument. So Colin, could we please have that article? All eyes are on DeSantis. Florida could make or break the GOP's redistricting edge. Sunshine State is likely Republicans' last best chance to claw back an edge ahead of November. Now, the edge they're referring to is the edge in the House overall, not the state of Florida. Jen, would you like to start?
Oh, sure. President Trump's redistricting war now rests on Florida and his one-time primary rival, Governor DeSantis. The Sunshine State is the GOP's likely best remaining chance to claw back an edge to keep their House majority after voters approved a gerrymander in Virginia that will allow Democrats to pick up as many as 4 new seats.
Can we just stop and talk about that for a second?
Well, yes. So this is really the point of this, of us really talking about this, I think, is that gerrymandering is a political game used by both sides. It's a both sides thing. So, and we've covered this before. I'm having a flashback to us bringing on Long Island activists and talking about the redistricting that happened up there in Melanie DeRigo's seat.
Oh yeah.
And that was all Democrats in New York that totally did that. So yeah.
The Democrats in New York were trying to gerrymander the state to have it be 23-3. 23-3.
So now
even Texas is not that brazen. I mean, they're pretty brazen in Texas, but they're not that brazen.
So what happened in Virginia gives them potentially more seats, but Florida, they're thinking they're going to switch that back. That's what we're talking about?
Here's another thing that I think people need to understand. That's very important. What you have to remember about this ballot initiative that they did in the state of Virginia to get gerrymandering approved for the Democrats, which is brazen beyond words to begin with, because you're making it hyper-partisan, which of course is how the majority of voters in midterm elections typically operate to begin with. But think about the amount of money that the Democratic establishment pumped into the state of Virginia to get this done. And we're going to get to what happened in California in a minute.
So this is just an important point of media literacy, recognizing that this is a both party situation. Okay.
Now, all eyes are on Florida to deliver a new map that could net the party anywhere from 3 to 5 seats, with legislators scheduled to hold a special session next week. National and state Republicans are counting on DeSantis to deliver on the White House priority and ensure their 9-month redistricting war doesn't end in a wash. One of the seats that is potentially on the chopping block is Wasserman Schultz's. This is honestly an all-hands-on-deck moment, because if you lose the House, you're going to bring essentially the agenda to a grinding halt. Blah, 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 blah. What agenda? You mean the endless war agenda? The genocidal agenda? And that's pretty much what it is. This is DeSantis reached the governor's mansion during the 2018 cycle with help from well-timed Trump endorsements and became a rising Republican star during the COVID-19 pandemic that led to him challenging the president in the 24 election. The two had a rapprochement after Trump won, but they aren't always in lockstep. All eyes are on DeSantis in Florida. It's a little poetic. DeSantis has his marching orders: take the gloves off like Dems did in Virginia and California, and draw as many districts as you can legally for Republicans. Any redistricting effort in Florida is bound to run into political and legal obstacles. DeSantis first began clamoring for mid-decade redistricting last summer, roughly the same time the White House began pushing for lawmakers in Texas to act. Since then, Trump's popularity has waned, and backlash over high costs of living and his ongoing genocide in Gaza and his war in Iran has complicated Republicans' midterm landscape. One Florida GOP operative familiar with the governor's thinking, granted anonymity because he is not authorized to speak publicly, said that DeSantis would like to get something done on redistricting, but he realizes that atmospherics for the 2026 election are already in place, and it will be tough for Republicans to retain the House regardless of what happens in Florida. That is
okay. Also, people note this. Wait, go back, Colin, for a second. Scroll back to the beginning of that last one. Okay. One Florida GOP operative. What is that? Okay. When you see, what is that? What does that mean? What is a GOP operative? Because I know the kind of people. You and I know exactly the kind of people that they're talking about. But
you know what the funny thing is? We can narrow this down on both sides to like 5 to 7 people that it could possibly be. That's
for me. We would be able to easier do it on the Dem side, I think, in terms of who's who. But you know what? These are the equivalent of some of those ladies in different parts of Florida that are always operative talking. You know what I'm talking about. Anywho. So guys, just be aware when you see something like this, GOP operative, take that with a grain of salt. That is someone whose job is literally to tell you what the party wants you to think about it. It doesn't mean it's true. It's just that's the party's spokesperson. And because they don't give a name and say who it is, you have to also double question. Okay.
The other thing you have to remember, and we've seen this in both parties, do you guys understand that in the corporate consultant class, ideology doesn't mean anything? It means nothing. You know how many people we've seen cross over back and forth, one part or the other?
Yeah.
Hillary Cosell goes to the GOP. David Jolly comes to the Democrats. You know how often that shit goes on?
Charlie Crist.
Can't make up his mind. He's in as
About
many
anything.
closets as he can fit into. I love you, Charlie, but I can't help but break your balls about that. Charlie Crist
it's
has
a
always
problem.
got the law, always.
Yeah.
But he is a politician through and through. I don't think he's an evil guy, but he's a smooth salesman. No question.
I don't support people that, to me, don't seem comfortable with their own self.
Well, that's for sure.
So DeSantis would like to get something done on redistricting, but he realizes the atmospherics will make it tough.
I read that part.
Okay. There are also legal questions over how far DeSantis and GOP lawmakers in Florida can go in redrawing the map, raising doubts about whether they can actually pull it off. They can. The state has a strict ban on redrawing congressional districts for partisan gain or to help hurt incumbents. Democrats argue any effort to redraw maps is illegal. Let's see that. Democrats in Florida argue that any effort to redraw maps is illegal and will hurt and will run afoul of this constitutional prohibition.
Not in Illinois, not in California, not in New York, and
not in
definitely not in Virginia. But in Florida, yes, it's illegal in Florida. In Florida,
right, for them to do that. Okay, Democrats. Yeah.
Again, and this is the thing. The Democrats just gerrymandered Virginia worse than the Republicans gerrymandered Texas. And no one will talk about it in corporate media. No one.
No. Did they cover that on, I mean, I don't watch Fox, but I would think that that would be something they might harp on, but.
Well, yes, Fox News, of course, and on all the different media outlets and all that shit. But the fact of the matter is, everybody is a freaking hypocrite. That's the thing. That's why this story, as much as it has relevance in that gerrymandering is terrible and that it shouldn't exist and fair districting should absolutely exist, there is a reason why we don't talk about partisan politics on this channel. There's a reason why it's never made a front and center part of the story, because it's a waste of time and it doesn't actually equate to anything. Now, there is actually a story that did take place at the same time that this shit was going on that, of course, nobody is talking about.
Are we going to go into the wonderful California Democrats?
You know, I had been saying that if there is a true silver lining to Mamdani winning the mayoral seat in New York, there's things that he's going to do that I think are good. But one thing in particular that I think he is going to have a tremendous impact on is he is not going to get in the way of New Yorkers trying to pass the New York Health Act. I do think that he will provide at least some type of a runway where they could potentially do it themselves. Now, the Democratic establishment will work tooth and nail to stop them. The other state in the union that apparently has gotten fairly close to getting their single-payer system through is California. And it looks like they were getting a little
state in the country, right? Isn't California
a little too close? Which also goes to show you that any of you out there that is thinking that Tom Steyer is going to be your next governor in California, and he hasn't said one word about this, saying, hey, get me elected governor and I'll make sure that single payer gets passed in Sacramento. I haven't heard that yet.
Libertarian Social Democrat, agree 1,000%. Agree 1,000%. And I do also, like our friend Grumbine, have concerns about what will happen when it does pass in a state and then it gets sabotaged and then it fails.
You're never passing at the federal level.
Wait a second.
Doing it.
Well, I'm not saying that we're doing it. I'm saying how I see it can be fit, because on the state level, when you're dealing with a non-currency creator at a state level, there are multiple ways that something can fail like that, which is why it does need to be done at the federal level. I'm not going to say it's never going to happen. I think that we're getting closer. I think inevitably, just like people probably never thought we'd have Social Security or Medicare either. So it's like, I do think we'll get there.
We needed in order for something like that to happen. You know, that's also something you got to think about. And the reason why I don't believe it's going to happen at the federal level until something sparks at the state level is what, you know, guest of the show Tom Hartman once said, which is, if you're going to pass it at the state level, you have to have federal protections, you know, in terms of funding. You know, all states get federal funding. So there has to be, again, don't compare Vermont to California. Two completely different situations. And
no, but we're talking about non-currency creators, and that's the bottom line. And when you don't when you're dependent on the federal government currency, then it's not really completely within your control, and your program can be sabotaged and fail in how it's set up. That's my thought.
Well, this is what happened the other day with CalCare.
Across California are outraged after Sacramento lawmakers blocked a major health care reform bill. The state assembly failed to advance AB 1900, or CalCare, which aimed to create a single-payer system. The California Nurses Association is calling the move a failure in leadership, pointing the finger directly at Democrats who hold a supermajority in the legislature.
Let's elect
How
more
about
Democrats.
that?
Just elect more Democrats. That will solve the problem, Jen.
Yeah.
That's definitely
If
going to
only, if only Kamala were in charge, if only Kamala were in charge, it would all be better.
Yeah. This is, again, a prime example of what makes the news versus what doesn't make the news. Now, of course, this is Fox Local in Sacramento, so that naturally is going to make the news because, again, it's a pretty big deal in the state capital. However, you are not going to see anybody on national media covering a story like this, not a chance in hell, because this is real policy. This is something that could tangibly help working people's lives. We are not going to see that because, again, it is a farce. And this is the whole thing we have been saying for the longest time. If you don't have Joe Manchin, you have Kyrsten Sinema. If you don't have Kyrsten Sinema, you have John Fetterman. If you don't have John Fetterman, you'll have somebody else.
Right. The parliamentarian. You'll have the parliamentarian. It's so interesting, though, because I, am married to somebody from California, and I've spent a lot of time in California. And, one of the biggest companies that I remember from always being there is Kaiser Permanente. Right. And whatever other, HMO type care, middle managed care organizations they have out there. I would think that those companies are probably some of the biggest lobbyists in Sacramento. I would think that this is just they probably put all their effort into blocking this. That's what they're doing.
I definitely agree. I think that they are going to go tooth and nail to try to stop this from happening. And this is also part and parcel why I think that the GOP actually has a realistic chance of pulling this off in a couple of months. The election's in 6 weeks. In 6 weeks, there is a very distinct possibility that Hilton and Bianca were going to be the two top candidates. And California is going to see a major shift red. And let me tell you, Jen and I have discussed this before. I think if the GOP is making, if they could sign up right now to lose the federal midterms in a wash, but at the same time take over the state of California, they would sign for that in a heartbeat. In a heartbeat, they would sign for it because all they would have to do in a 4-year period, here's what the GOP would only have to do if they take the governor's mansion for 4 years. There's only one thing they have to do: reduce the cost of living in California. If they do that, the Democrats are going to have a very big problem going forward. And right now they have a very big problem because of shit like this. Why? Because they know that it's a governor's election and the Democrats are just as corporate bought off as the Republicans are. And they don't want to have to face the fact that you've got a couple of gubernatorial candidates running in the Democratic Party right now saying we're going to give you single payer health care if we get in there. Now this sets the shit back another year or more.
Yes.
That's what they do.
Yeah.
But remember, very important, keep voting for the Democrats.
Despite support from over 300 organizations and 2/3 of voters, nurses accuse Democratic lawmakers of caving to corporate interests.
Huh. Really? How unusual.
Yeah, I've never heard that.
Democrats caving to corporate interests.
Somebody said the other day, and this is very true. I think it's Ben Hawk, who's actually in California. He's a good activist. And he said the big difference between Bernie and AOC, you really only have to twist her arm ever so slightly to get her to get in line. Bernie will ultimately fall in line, but he is at least somebody who enraged a significant portion of this country that they haven't given up on these primary issues. Alex is the type of person who, as I've said before, I would not trust as far as I could throw her, because the one thing you could say about Bernie is that he's stubborn as an ox. Yeah, and he's fake. You could say he's fake. You could say whatever you want. But the fact of the matter is, he believes in his way of doing business, and he thinks it's the right way to do it. He's wrong. But I do think that Bernie believes in his convictions. Alex, I said this to you. I'll say it to the channel. Alex is what if Vibes was a politician? That's what you get. AOC is Vibes. Some good vibes.
Well, I find they're all vibes. They're all vibes. They're all useless. They're all doing nothing. They're all there just enriching themselves. So they're all vibes. The whole thing is vibes. Yeah. And from being there last week, it's not even good vibes. I'll tell you that right now. It's really bad vibes.